For heavy metal bands, achieving mainstream success is a tall order. To do so while laying the foundation for progressive metal, well, that's enough to be called a legend. But despite their quick rise to fame, these 5 friends from Seattle had more trouble than they let on at the time. What made this lineup work so well? How did they achieve their spotlight, and what happened since? In this video, we'll cover the stories of Geoff Tate, Chris DeGarmo, and their bandmates during the period we call the Reign of Queensryche. In the early 1980s, the Seattle rock scene was as lively as ever. A shared passion for Judas Priest and Iron Maiden inspired young Chris DeGarmo and 3 of his friends to form a metal band.
It was a last-minute thing. We had a couple songs together. We'd done a sort of a demo recording project, and we didn't have anything to call the band. I had this song that I had written for our first little project called Queen of the Reich, and for lack of anything better, just sort of put the words together, and there was Queensryche, and now we've been traveling around trying to get people to spell it right.
As the recording of their demo was nearing completion, the band was still without a singer. They decided to approach Geoff Tate, a hero of the local scene, who at the time was singing in a progressive rock band. Hungry for some recording experience, Geoff agreed to the proposal, and the result was the Queensryche EP. The EP sold thousands of copies through word of mouth and eventually attracted the attention of magazines and major labels. Geoff, who was still following his prog rock dream, was reluctant to join the band full-time. However, after the EP received a stellar review in Kerrang! Magazine, sales shot through the roof, and the singer finally agreed to complete the lineup. By 1983, Queensryche was signed by EMI Records. Their first full-length release, titled The Warning, was released the following year. Through the help of their new label, Queensryche quickly became a regular support act for bands like Dio, Kiss, and Iron Maiden, making new fans everywhere they went. In 1986, Queensryche released Rage for Order, which was a unique combination of the band's heavy metal roots with Geoff's progressive influence.
Working with our producer Neil Kernan on this project has been a real pleasure because Neil is a perfectionist, which means he fits in with us real well. And he's also a slave driver, which means we're getting a lot done in a very short amount of time.
One of the most exciting parts of the project has been actually working with Geoff, because Geoff's voice is incredibly versatile. There really aren't that many singers who can do what he can do as well as he can do it.
During the recording of the album, the band's management pushed them to adopt a more glam rock image, and EMI was pushing toward radio-friendly songs. Still wanting to keep their authenticity, the band decided to cover a dark and quirky song by Canadian singer Lisa Dalbello, which became their new single. Touring in support of the album, the band was once again opening for famous acts such as AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne, and Bon Jovi. But this time, they felt somewhat out of place. Surrounded by stereotypical rock stars singing about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, Queensryche felt their own message was drowning out. These feelings were channeled into the writing process of the following album, as they all knew they had to break the mold. In a stroke of inspiration, Geoff Tate dreamt up a short story which became the basis of a concept album. What the band turned up with was one of the most important records in the history of metal. This episode is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you're enjoying our content and want to help us sustain it, head over to patreon.com/razbenari and you'll be first to see our new videos plus extras. Thanks for watching! In 1988, the band released its very own rock opera called Operation Mindcrime.
Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime, one of the most powerful and compelling concept albums of the decade. A masterpiece that will blow you away, including I Don't Believe in Love.
The story follows Nicky, a young drug addict who becomes disillusioned with society. He finds a friend in Dr. X, a leader of a revolutionary group, who becomes both his guide and his source of heroin. Through his influence over Nicky, Dr. X then sends the young man to assassinate political figures. During the course of the story, Nicky meets Sister Mary, a nun and former prostitute, and the two fall in love. For Dr. X, this paints Mary as a risk for the operation.
The character of Mary we met in a club in Amsterdam in '86, who was a woman dressed like a nun, and she was dancing to this very up-tempo disco music, but she was sort of moving in slow motion. I think she was on heroin, and she was clutching this ragged teddy bear to her chest, and she had the most sad look on her face.
The album, widely regarded as a cornerstone of progressive metal, has earned the band a certain image, one they weren't completely comfortable with.
I mean, if you walk into a record store and you got the bins and they all have labels, and you walk up to this thing that says Thinking Man's Metal Band, it's just like, pass. You know, I mean, who would walk in and buy that?
I just want to rock.
During the tour in support of Operation Mindcrime, the band was faced with a new problem. They were still just an opening act and thus weren't able to play the album in its entirety, the way it was meant to be played. That is, until their management found an in.
And then, like a couple weeks later, they called back and said, you know, we have this chance to do a video. Are you guys interested in doing it? I think we can get the people at MTV to play it. So we made a video for Eyes of a Stranger. The next thing you know, boom, 500,000 sales, boom.
And I raise my head and stare into the eyes of a stranger. I've always known that the mirror never lies.
The video rocketed Queensryche into mainstream attention, and rock magazines everywhere were calling the album a masterpiece. Thus, the band went from being an underground secret to the rising stars of heavy metal.
Because now with the success of Mindcrime, it was our first gold record, which MTV helped blow the door open on that record for us. And now we had some financial horsepower, where before we'd just been really struggling. We had stuck together, the five of us, up to that point, and we were really clicked as a unit at that point.
The psychic energy was phenomenal. I mean, remember that time you walked in the control room, you didn't say a word, and everybody just took off all their clothes?
I did hold the band completely at my will for sexual... Sure, there was a certain hostage type element to it.
With great momentum on their side, they began working on their next album. On August 20th, 1990, Queensryche releases Empire. In the opening track, titled Best I Can, Chris DeGarmo ponders the effects of his estranged father on his own life. For Empire, making another concept album was not on the table.
So we really were pleased with how Mindcrime turned out. We were ready for something else. Maybe songs that kind of stood on their own, separate, that didn't rely on one another.
Knowing the importance of music videos this time, they ended up shooting a total of 6. In one of the songs, Jeff talks about his longing for his wife during a long tour. The song was called Jet City Woman. However, the catchy rock tunes were not the ones to catch the audience this time.
Number 3. Number 2. Number 1.
The number 1 rock track of the year is Silent Lucidity from the double platinum selling album Empire.
And the winner is Queensryche.
Written by Chris DeGarmo, Silent Lucidity broke all of the band's previous records, hitting number 1 on the US rock charts, winning the MTV Viewer's Choice Award, and earning the band a Grammy nomination.
Our next performers went from cult status to stardom this year with their acclaimed album Empire. You know about it. Here to perform their breakthrough song, Silent Lucidity. If I can say that, this is Queensryche. Give it up!
All of a sudden we were, being invited to play on award shows and doing lots of television.
Queensryche!
It was a weird thing to get used to, I don't think any of us really thought of ourselves as that kind of, entertainer, personality, rock star, so to speak. To us, rock star was always kind of like a...
Despite the album's immense success, not everyone was happy with Empire. Having gathered a large metal following with Mindcrime, some of the fans were alienated by the more radio-friendly tunes of the new album.
When we first started out years ago, the writers, in an attempt to categorize Queensryche, were saying that we sounded just like Judas Priest, an American Judas Priest. And then we heard later on, no, they're an American Iron Maiden. That's what they are. So now, a few years down the road, they're saying that we're an American Pink Floyd.
And even within the band, at least one person had mixed feelings. A journalist named Malcolm Dome got to interview Jeff and Chris in what he describes as the usual band formula of promoting a new album. But out of the blue, DeGarmo then asked Dome if they could meet for breakfast the next day. What began as an off-the-record chat turned into an on-record emotional outburst. DeGarmo's statement seems so confused and vulnerable that Dome chose not to publish the interview at the time, and the band's momentum was unhindered. At least, not by the media. After a very long tour and a long subsequent break, the band went into a studio called Big Log, essentially a cabin in the woods, in order to sober up and refocus.
We are in the San Juan Islands, north of Seattle, where we're based from. And here's where we're going to be hanging out for the next few months, recording this new album.
Have you ever tried to live with 10 guys?
Morning! It's boozing time, baby.
Another espresso morning.
Breakfast of champions.
That's right.
Where's the beer?
Does it smell like it?
Smells like Jeffrey Dahmer's fridge.
I eat the shit every morning.
Szechuan shui super hot.
I need another beer.
From the band's perspective, it's pretty easy because we've been on the road together for so many years.
Continuing their ways of subverting expectations, the album was nothing like any of their previous work. Radio Friendly was tossed out the window, and in came a rather dark and eerie sound.
Certainly so many wonderful things happened as a result of our last album, Empire. But that album had a general feeling of being up, and I think we wanted to step away from kind of a shiny, happy people vibe and step back into the shadows.
In the lyrics, the band reveals how many of their own expectations were subverted as well.
Promised Land is, for me, the reevaluation of my life, looking back at where I've been and partly realizing that what I thought was the pinnacle, or what I thought was the brass ring that was worth grabbing, is really not so great, that there's other things that are more important than success at what you do as a job.
In another single, titled Bridge, DeGarmo once again addresses his father, who had passed away during the recording of the album.
It means a lot to me. It's a song that probably has been sitting around waiting to be written.
Despite Chris and Jeff writing many of the songs together, tensions between them were at an all-time high.
We're in Washington right now. Now this room, until a couple minutes ago, was very quiet. Everybody that's in this room right now has got headphones on. These are all 1,500 Queensryche fans with 1,500 pair of headphones, all listening to the brand new album Promised Land, which comes out Tuesday.
On October 18th, 1994, more than 4 years after the release of Empire, Queensryche released Promised Land.
So Jeff, right now you're hanging out with the people that listen to the record. These aren't the stupid critics that write the reviews. These are the people that buy the record, and what's the response people have gotten so far?
A lot of question marks.
Question marks?
Yeah.
While the hardcore fans appreciated the eccentric tone of the album, those who waited for another hit machine like Empire were left with a sour taste. After another tour, albeit a shorter one this time, Promised Land sold well overall. But Queensryche's mainstream attention was fading, as Seattle's grunge movement was quickly taking over. In 1997, the band released Here in the Now Frontier, which was perhaps a way for the band to get with the times. Recorded in Pearl Jam's home studio, with a previous Alice in Chains producer, the grunge influence was unmistakable. Whether this was the band's decision or the record label's remains unknown. What was clear, however, was that the album was not selling.
The way the business works is they want everything to be neat and tidy in a little package that doesn't deviate from the last presentation, you know? And so we were always a difficult band to market, I think.
And the bad news didn't stop there. During the supporting tour, EMI went bankrupt, which meant the band had to finance the tour themselves. And worst of all, after 14 years of being the band's chief songwriter, Chris DeGarmo decided that he had enough. With that, the reign of Queensryche was over. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and if you'd like to see more of our documentaries, click here for a full playlist of them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.